Kelli, welcome back to the closet.
Thank you so much, Christy. I always love seeing you, and I know that we're going to have a great conversation. We always do.
We will, and I love the timeliness of that. I know that when we were trying to schedule you coming back on, we knew we were going to be talking about something slightly shifting into one of the many arenas that you are an expert in. And this time we're going to be talking about writing a book, which I loved the timing of it for so many reasons that we're going to dive into. One of them was we're getting into the heart of winter. Like after the holidays, people are in upstate New York, there's a bit of a prep mentally, physically. If you're someone, whether or not you're someone who likes to be outside, we've had some pretty cold days lately. And I just feel like we're both such avid readers and writers, so we're biased. At the same time, it's such a wonderful opportunity while you're cozied up to have the time be, I won't even say productive, just something that's very enriching and memorable and where you feel inspired to get through the long winter. So
100%.
Kicking it off there, like, what are your thoughts in regards to being inspired seasonally to start writing a book?
Well, I think that we are always influenced by our environment, probably more so than we realize. And just to your point, a great thing happened last night that kind of speaks to what you just suggested. My daughter had been at work and then gone out with a friend for dinner. And she came home and immediately walked in and she said, "It's so cold. All I want to do is curl up in my blanket and open my book." And I thought, all right, plant corn, grow corn. But at the same time, yes, because there is something about that cold weather, that inability to stay outside for a long time, that hibernation mode,
yes,
that pulls you inside. It makes you want to wrap up, sit in front of the fire, open a book, open a journal, get into a project that you can, dive into, like writing, where you have some more time to really sit with it. And the environment absolutely influences and gives us sort of that feel of wanting to be cozy in that way.
Yeah, it does. And, to your point, I feel like when you were saying journaling, or I didn't even think about this beforehand, but we're going to jump into the process of how to write a book, because as co-owner of Scriptor Publishing, you have much experience in helping people from the whole entire spectrum, people who are a total novice and maybe terrified of it, but still want to people who've already published a few different books, maybe on their own or through you guys. And I'm just wondering, when you're talking about journaling, do you feel that could be, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but a way to just start warming the muscle of approaching how to write a book? What are the benefits there?
Yes, for sure. And in fact, Christy, this is one of your things. And I remember you actually introducing me to this, Julia Cameron's morning pages, right? Sitting down and writing 3 pages, just getting consistent with the process of writing, getting a habit of writing. And, it's like anything. If you want to get better at it, you have to practice. So the practice of journaling allows you to get that consistency, to practice using different words, to practice different ideas and descriptions, and just, to play with the words, but doing it on a consistent basis. So that can be a great primer for leading into a book.
Yeah. And to that point, the consistency of it allows you to transcend how you feel that day, that morning. It's just what you do. I love the idea of it's just what you do. It's like brushing your teeth, just something you do. So it doesn't matter how you feel. It's not like, oh, I feel like journaling, or I feel like, writing 2 pages. That's just what you do. And like one of our favorite authors shared, Anne Lamott, shitty first drafts. Just to put out there, right? Like it's going and knowing that gives such a sense of relief, for sure. So before we're jumping ahead. I did think,
because we're great journalists and we love writing. We get there.
Yeah, when you said I was like, oh my gosh. But I do want to back up. I want to start with the idea with you. Like, what inspired you to create a publishing company? In addition to loving writing and reading, what was the inspiration behind that?
All right, I'll share an interesting story, because I honestly, it started, I think I planted the seed when I was about 5 years old. And I was home with my grandmother. At the time, I was sick. I think I was homesick with my grandmother. My grandmother had stayed to take care of me that day. And while I was home, because I wasn't feeling well, what do? You write. You do something creative that you can, stay quiet, like we were just talking about on a cold day or whatever. So I wrote this book, My Best Day Ever, it was called, and I illustrated it in my little 5-year-old terrible drawings and whatever, and I put it together, and I remember it so distinctly because I still have the book. And I remember handing it to my grandmother and saying, Grandma, someday I'm going to be an author. And I handed her the book. Now, 5 years old, right? I wanted to be an astronaut, a president, and an author. Who knows what I wanted to be back then. But I do think that the seed of writing and I think the thrill that comes from it, the enjoyment of it, started when I was really young. And so always somewhere in the back of my mind, if somebody said, oh, would you like to write a book someday? I would say, sure, of course. A lot of people have that dream, or maybe somewhere think about it. But did I ever think I would own a publishing company? No, that was never on any vision board that I had put out. But fortunately, because connections work the way they do, I was introduced through a network that I'm connected with to another person who became my business partner, Greg Justice. Greg had written, at that point, probably a dozen books. I had by then written 2 or 3 books. And we were talking and saying, we've done this enough. And we have a process and we have some resources that we could help other people do this. And so Scriptor Publishing Group was born. And actually, we were just talking about it. It was January of 2017, 5 years ago this month, that we incorporated and actually began Scriptor Publishing Group.
Did it totally fly by? Do you feel like 5 years went in a flash, or do you feel
very, very fast? Yeah. I like when we were just talking about it, wait, was it 4 years? It's 5 years? How can it be 5 years already? Yeah.
And you guys have published
hundreds of authors, hundreds and hundreds of authors. I think we've published just over 120, I think 126 or 127 books in 5 years. And some of those are collaborative books. So we've been able to, to have 10 or 20 authors in one book. One of our books had 40 chapters with 40 different authors. So we've helped a lot of people become published authors, and it's been amazing.
That's such a great segue. So first of all, congratulations, because that's no easy feat on so many different levels to be able to not just maintain, but actually build and see it growing like that. Because if I remember correctly, you did start with a niche within more wellness, fitness, and you guys have just completely expanded on that.
Exactly right. Because both of us at that time, 5 years ago, were both in the fitness industry. Greg still is. He's been inducted into the National Fitness Hall of Fame. He owns a fitness studio out in Kansas City and is very much present, is actually still training and working in fitness. Once we started Scriptor and it went as big as it went, I actually ended up closing my fitness studio because it was just too many things going at once to be able to do it. But we started with that thought that we would help people in that fitness industry, health and wellness, really write platform books to help them expand their audience and get their message out to a bigger audience of people. By the 3rd book that we published, within 6 months of that first year, we were already outside of that because somebody referred somebody, and we ended up, actually publishing a memoir. And within that first year, we said, we can stay in this niche, or we can actually take our system and we can help anybody. And so since then, we've published children's books and memoirs and fictional novels and cookbooks, and you name it, we've done pretty much every genre.
You really did. Cookbooks. That throwing that in definitely nails every that shows the variety for sure. And you just hit on something that I love. So part of the why of beginning was that platform expansion, right? What would be other reasons that people would write books? What's the why? Even if there's maybe a theme that you see, or just top 3 reasons, what do you feel?
I would say there's probably 3 to 4 primary reasons that people want to write a book. Number 1 is to expand their platform, like we were talking about. They're in business, or they have a message that they want to share with a bigger audience, and so they're looking for a way to spread that message. Number two is just their own passion, their passion for writing or their passion for the subject, or, like me, when they were 5 years old, they dreamed of writing a book and they just want to get it done and do that. So that's another great reason to write a book. Another one is just plain profit. They want to make some money. It's a way to create a revenue stream and to bring some money into your personal life or your business, if that's what you're looking to do. So I would say those are probably the top three reasons. Sometimes we'll have people that want to build their business or expand their business in different ways. For example, maybe they want to present more, and having a book is a great way to open a door to be able to present on stage in different audiences. So those are really primary reasons that I see.
Yeah, and it tends to give, natural indirect reasons that come from it. Bernie Freitag was on twice. The first time that he was on, so many indirect, like he had a reason for writing the book, and then so many other indirect benefits came out of it. Can you speak to some of those that may be surprising for people?
And I'll share about Bernie's, because Bernie was on your podcast on the Closet series a couple weeks ago and was talking about his book and the project he was doing with Love Your Brain. And so I had commented, I think I shared your Closet series on my Facebook page or something and commented on it. And sure enough, a person that I actually went to school with, grew up with me, contacted me. I talked to her yesterday. She's going to write a book. So the reason that she was inspired was because when we were in second grade, she was in my class. She was a good friend of mine. We were in second grade and she had a terrible accident. Her father was cutting down a limb off a tree and she was under the limb and it hit her and caused a traumatic brain injury. So she was out of school for a lot of that year and ended up being able to come back to school, but, was held back a year and, eventually graduated, went on to college and is doing very well, but has lived with this traumatic brain injury, paralyzed her left side and, all kinds of things that she's had to overcome. So when she saw Bernie's post that you were sharing in the Closet series and then knew that he was helping Love Your Brain, she reached out and said, I've always thought about writing my story. And can we talk about it? And I literally talked with her yesterday for the first time since I graduated in 1984, as much as I'm as long ago as that was. I don't know if I've spoken with her since then. It was amazing.
That's literally amazing. It's on so many different levels, that I'm going to hit right now. So Bernie taking the chance to write, even if he was nervous or scared or whatever might have been inhibiting him at first, to be able to then come on a second time to talk about a very intimate and personal story. And then you have no idea who that is going to impact, influence, inspire, and the reconnections that happen, the way that now you get to say, because I know you love that. You love like, oh, this is so exciting. I have this reconnection and it's all from this and that. And you love that. So there's so many indirect and speaking of the fear that comes from that too, because even when we say, you know what, I do want to do this to expand my business or because I want to inspire other people, or maybe I want to expand my business. I also really love the client population I work with, and this is for them or whatever it is. You're inevitably going to hit fears. And you had sent me some of the top 4 that you run into. I would love to run through those with you and for you to unpack them and maybe give even just a glimmer of, if this is your fear, here's something you can do to maybe just dissipate it a bit. Okay. Sound fun?
Sure. Yeah. Good.
So we've never had so much fun with fears, huh, Kel?
We love fear.
We love ourselves some fear. Okay. So the first one is classic. So the first one is, I'm not a good writer.
Yeah. Always. You hear that so many times. I think a lot of times we're told when we're young that we're not good at something, or we were graded poorly and therefore we assume that we're not. And so if that is you, if you are out there and you're listening to this and you think, I could never write a book because I'm not a good writer, I will, number one, remind you that the way you wrote in high school or college was a certain way, and there was a need to give you a grade in order for you to get through that program. That is way different than I have a story or I have a message and I want to share it. That is very different than writing a book. And so even if you think you're not a great writer because you were somehow influenced by your past, I assure you that writing now is different. And then I will also add the additional safety net of writing is one thing, editing is another. And so if you can write the general idea and then get a good editor, the editor can really make that story pop and make sure that before it goes out into the world, it is a good, well-written story. So you don't have to depend completely on yourself. You can have help and get other resources to help you really shine it and polish it.
Such a great insight, because so many people, that probably just comes as a given to you and Greg and whoever else owns publishing companies, that it's a little hidden village in a way of writing a book. But for someone who's starting up, it seems so daunting and it seems like it's just you. So that reminder is fantastic. And you're hitting on a few things. So one thing that you talked about before with morning pages, I feel like that is such a great primer to start writing a book. The consistency, like you said before, also just the brain dump. Like morning pages are a stream of consciousness writing. So for you to be able to, instead of editing through, which I have a tendency to do that. I know I'm in company with a few other people that instead of writing through, I have to verbally tell myself, keep writing. Do not go back to edit. Do not go back to edit. Do not go back to edit. And just to get, and morning pages is that. Morning pages is 3 stream of consciousness pages. No judgment. You write whatever's there. You're just brain dumping. So I think that's great. The other is, I also heard, and I am wondering your thoughts on this, for someone who's thinking, I don't write well. And even though, Kelli, you may have inspired me a little or given me a little bit of a glimmer of hope that it does take more people. And I never thought about the editor side and all that. What are your thoughts on people speaking their words and then just transcribing, either transcribing themselves or getting a transcription service?
Yesterday, when I was speaking with my friend Colleen, I was just describing who had the brain injury. She said to me that the actual writing process is such a block for her. And it's because the process of typing is really hard for her.
Sure.
So she can speak it just fine, but she's limited in how quickly she can get it out by typing it and certainly by writing it. And so I told her exactly what I'm going to tell you. And I'll add to that, my business partner, Greg Justice, who has now written, I think, 22 or 23 books, has never once actually handwritten or typed any one of his books. He speaks all of them. He's got ADHD. He's busy. He's always got things going and his mind's always going. So whenever he is working on a project and he's got it going through his brain, he records it and then has it transcribed. And it's what I told Colleen yesterday, that if you are limited in some way by the actual process of writing, that you're maybe more of an auditory learner or you just are a better speaker than writer, then we use, and this is a great resource for anybody out there, we recommend rev.com, rev.com, which is a transcription service. You record into it and they send it back to you transcribed within minutes at a very, very, very reasonable cost. And so then you can take the written piece and have it edited. But it's a great, great tool for people who are just more auditory or vocal presenters rather than the written word.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it can trip people up. We're going to put that in the show notes. So rev.com.
Rev.com, rev.com.
Okay. So that's the transcription service. So people don't have to listen to everything and then go back and say, where did Kelli say that? So it'll be in the notes for that. And that's a big deal. I feel like that could be, everybody hang tight and listen to the other 3 fears too. And the rest of what Kelli says, because I feel like that's such a takeaway that I got to see people be like, I want to go do it now. So hang tight. We're going to go through 3 more of the fears. And then the next one really scaffolds from this. Okay. So now you have helped me. I don't think I'm as bad of a writer as I think I thought I was. Where do I even start? How do I even start this?
So the way to start it is almost exactly what you just described with the morning pages, by doing a brain dump. We call it a mind map, by sitting down and just dumping any ideas that you can possibly think of that might have any relation whatsoever to the book. And for some people, that's a very scattered visual kind of brain dump. For some, it's just an outline, depending on how you think and process. But writing down every idea, like, here's a thought that I'd like to put in, here's a story that I think could be useful, here's what inspired me to write this book, here's what I think the book cover could look like, here's a color that I'd want in it, here's a picture I'd want to add, like whatever you can think of that has anything to do with what the topic is, get it down on the page. And then once you have it on a page, you can start to decide, this doesn't really match, or this all kind of fits together and maybe could be one chapter. It sort of starts to put the puzzle together. But the first step of the process is really just getting all the ideas down onto a page so you can sift through them and go from there.
And so I love myself Post-its for everything pretty much. And I know Post-its for me, for organizing thoughts, especially color coding. Yeah. If that is something you recommend at all, is that close to the beginning of the process for people who, because I even think, I'm thinking of clients right now I've talked to who, when they think of writing out an outline to anything, even to a system change within their organization, they get a little overwhelmed by seeing all of it on one page, and then they have to scroll back up. So I was like, do Post-its, color code, move them around, and then you can move them around versus a whiteboard. So I would say, don't put notes on a whiteboard, even if you take a picture of it and there's something tangible there. So what are your thoughts with Post-its? How would you?
Yes, I agree. And you have to really find a system that works for yourself. I would say dump it first and have it all be all over. And then the next step of the process is that organization where you might color code it, like, oh, all these topics seem to go together. I'll put them all in pink Post-its and put them here. And these ideas seem to kind of go together. They're going to be in green. And then you've got a visual on the wall or wherever you keep the notes or on the table, where you can sort of see how it gets structured. So I would say, sort of that second step of the process where you're sifting and putting it together, that's a great technique for organization.
It is. And I'll add to that too, and push back on this add to it. So you color code. So you're at that point, you're color coding. The cool thing is, not everybody has like a sprawling studio to write, and nor do you need one, really. I tried to convince myself, like, I need this to write. You just need to write. That's another unsolicited tip. You just need to write. Writers write. That's just it, right? Which I keep telling myself as well. So I'm taking my own advice on that. But if you don't have a big space, and say you use your kitchen to write and you dedicate a wall to it, the cool thing and the helpful thing, the exciting thing about the Post-its is that you can put them all up on the wall after the kids go to bed or whatever. And then if you can leave them up, great. But if you have to take them down for some reason, they're already color coded. So you just take them down and all the reds stay together and all the oranges stay together and all the greens stay together. So you don't have to rack your brain about where did I put the notes. And I love that. That to me, it just creates another playful piece. And you're seeing color in it, which creates another playful piece to it. So it doesn't seem as daunting.
Absolutely. I think all of that is great, especially for somebody who is a visual person or a kinetic learner, where they just need to kind of be manipulating it a little bit. The Post-it notes work really well for that. My mentor and coach, Todd Durkin, that's how he does it. He does all colored Post-it notes. They're all over the wall of his office when he's working on a project. Yeah. So I think it's a great tool for people who would really prefer that visual or that kinesthetic type of interaction with the information.
Yeah. And, and I'm thinking too, when you're talking about Todd, for anyone who's listening, as we go through the fears, go back and listen again and just trust yourself for which one to start at, because I'm realizing this could be even overwhelming, like hearing, well, I have all those fears. So now where do I start? Trust yourself to go, I'm going to start with fear number 3 or whatever it is of the ones we're listing. And then just trust yourself that naturally the others are connected and will start unraveling. They'll start losing their power as well. We're giving a lot of tips. And sometimes I'm of this mindset too, like, okay, it's too much. So you just trust yourself to know which one to start with. I just want to make a point of
And
that.
I'll also even simplify that one step more. If you're out there and you're listening and you're like, all of these are me and I'm still stuck, or I'm still stuck, even though I hear you and I know where I am, but I don't know what to do. You can always just set up a call with me. There's absolutely no obligation. There's no cost to that, but sometimes just talking it out with somebody so that I can help give you some feedback and mirror back to you and help you sort through your ideas and make some sense of them will give you a much firmer idea of what's next. So an initial consult with me is another very easy. If you're really daunted, just call me. We'll figure it out.
So generous. And we were going to anyway, but anybody who's hearing that, all contact info for Kelli and Scriptor Publishing will be in the notes as well. So you can make sure that you can check that out. So generous. So we're going to jump on to the third. I couldn't read my writing for a second. And then I was like, oh, that's a big one. I want to make sure I can read that. So the third fear, we covered, I'm not a good writer. We covered, I don't know how to begin. Where do I even start? And now we're moving on to someone else has already written about the topic.
Yeah, we hear that all the time. There's already 15 books out there on this. This isn't a new topic. It's not an original idea. And I will say to them, that's because there are so many books on that topic because it's a great topic. And then I say, and I'm looking at you in your closet with all your shelves, and I look at my bookshelves and I say, if you look at your shelf, how many books do you have on, in your case, personal development or self-help? How many books do you have that are fictional novel love stories? How many books do you have of whatever topic it is that you love?
Yeah.
Lots. You don't just have one, you have lots of them. And then I ask the question, and I'll ask you, Christy, if there was another book out there that was a self-help topic that you were really interested in, would you buy it?
Sure, of course.
Even if you had 20 of them already of different self-help books, you'd buy another one, right?
Of course, yeah.
Because you love that topic. Every book you open, there's another piece to be learned. Every person could have written about the exact same self-help topic in your case, right? It could have been the exact same topic, but every one of them is sharing it from their perspective.
Yes.
Their experience, their knowledge, and their voice. And so every one of them is unique, and they all bring a different perspective and a different element. And some of them repeat something and then it validates that thing. And you go, oh yeah, I get that. I know that. And you would still buy another one that said the same thing, right? So if there are people out there that have written a book on the topic that you want to write about, you should be jumping for joy, because it means there's a market for that book. And people that want to read about that will buy it. Yes. Because they want another perspective.
It's so true. And I love that way of looking at it, about having so many of the same books that you have. Because I have so many books on writing and personal development and movies. And I have to say, though, there can be repeat. So, and this is again, speaking to what you said about your authentic voice. So to lean even more into your authentic voice, I have two add-ons and I want you to piggyback with any thoughts too. One is, there are a gazillion books on one topic and they can be redundant, and you can be like, why the heck did I buy this book? It's saying the exact same thing because that author is not using their authentic voice. So even if themes may be repeated, it doesn't mean it needs to be redundant. So sure, themes may be repeated. They're not repeated, like you said, in your perspective. So you may offer a different insight. You also have different stories than people do to connect to those. So even more of a reason, if anybody's scared of like speaking their voice, like, oh, nobody's going to, we want to, we're yearning for authentic voices, especially within the personal development world. I mean, that's a quadrillion-dollar booming business for good reason, because we can't get enough. And also because we're looking for that thing, right? And so you might be the one who's contributing that thing, which I think is so big and so helpful. The second of that too, in regards to, I lost it. If it comes back to me, I'll bring it up. But there was something else about when you were saying using your own voice and being able to contribute in a way that is really genuine and not to be scared of of being redundant. If that comes back to me, I'll share it for sure. But for now, I mean, that seems pretty easy breezy. So that's that. And then again, if there is that fear of, I do want to share my voice, and then you start thinking, is this too much? Or what does that mean? That's when you would reach out to Scriptor, get clear on that, and then you'll be good to go. And then the last is the imposter syndrome, which naturally shows up, the I'm not good enough voice. Who am I to be a writer? Can you speak to that? How to undo that voice, quiet it down?
Oh, if I would be able to erase that voice in so many ways, right? We all have a little bit of that imposter syndrome at different moments in our life. And a lot of the people that are afraid of writing or scared to get their story out there will come and say, I feel like I'm not good enough. Somebody else already wrote this, and fine, I'll use my unique voice, but my voice is not as good as theirs. And I think you spoke beautifully to this just now, Christy, when you said, you bring your own authenticity to it and your own stories. And there's not a better or a worse. There's just a difference. There's a uniqueness. That person cannot be you, and you cannot be that person. And that's the beauty of the world, right? We don't need two of that person. We need you and we need them, not or. And so being you is all you ever need to be. That is easily said, harder to get to. But when I work with people, when I'm coaching them through this process, I just try and remind them of how important they are, unique in and of themselves, and that every single one of us has something important to contribute and to give. And if you're being called and nudged and you have that sort of internal yearning to get it out, I call it kind of that bubbling up feeling, then just trust it, and just let it come and get out there. What it does once it leaves is really none of your business. You just your job is to get it out, and then the book will take care of itself from there.
It's so true. And I love the and. I love the reminder of the and. There's so much power in that. And it adds to the vibration of it all when we don't look at, because then there's that abundant versus lack mentality and feeling that's going into the book. And so if you're giving that feeling into the book and it's not coming from that abundant, inspired, higher energy place, then you're going to self-sabotage. You're going to hit so many kinks to self-sabotage. So I love that it's, and there's room for all, and nobody has been here before. And it did make me think of what I was going to say before. Two things, actually. So I want to attribute this to Austin Kleon. If you're familiar with Austin Kleon, he wrote many books. One of them is Steal Like an Artist. I think it's called Steal Like an Artist. Short, quick reads, really inspirational. One thing that he says is create what you'd want to consume. And that is something I always go back to. it. So it's write what you'd want to read and write what you know, right? So it's like, write what you know and what you'd want to read. Like, would that be a self-help book, or would that be a fiction book that you would want to read? And I love that, because then it creates this cool kind of objectivity from your ego being the person writing the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember someone along the way, one of my mentors or teachers or somebody, said something very similar, like, don't write about what you don't know. You write about what you know. Just share what you know. That's enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know a lot, and you've had a lot of experience. Every one of us has had, I always say that there's at least one book in every one of us, because we have our story and it's just ours. It's nobody else's. And that's enough.
I love that idea of that everybody has a book inside of them, because there's one of us, there's one story, and you might have more. Okay, you definitely have at least one. So that's such inspiration. If you're someone who's starting out and you always had the itch and you just kept saying, no, who am I? Or had any of these fears, it's so important to be reminded that. So thank you. And especially, like I said, like going into the winter, the depths of winter, we're stepping into the depths of it at this point. And there is this sense of, especially everything happening in the world, a sense of isolation, a sense of stagnation. We're going to get to one of the books that I love, exactly what I'm talking about in a second. And one of the writers, the young writers, referenced COVID as a red light that never ends. And I just was like, how profound from such a young mind. It was so true. And it's just, you're sitting in a red light. And then she has such an uplifting shift and an ebb and flow in her story for sure. But when you're feeling that way, you're in winter, we don't know what's happening with COVID, even if the variants are changing and they're not, it doesn't matter. There's still that sense of stagnation. This is such a great way to just keep your spirits up and to flowing and to feel collaborative and to feel that sense of support. So just to reiterate so much of what you already said, there's so much inspiration and support that I'm hearing from that. And there's so much more to writing a book. I want to save when you're talking about the process, I want to have you back on, and I want to do it in different sections so that people can consume. Okay, I'm getting through the fears. I'm going to start writing, and then we'll have you back on. And if they haven't reached out to you yet, you can share. Okay, so now here's the full overarching process of it, right? Okay. Yeah. And if you are jonesing and itching for the entire process of it, that's something too that you can reach out to Kelli about, just to get an idea of the overview of it. So you know what you're in for, timeframes. There is an overarching that everybody can start from, and yet it's so subjective because everybody's lives and time, it's so different. So, yes.
And I'll add to that really quickly, because if you go, if that's you and you're like, you need to see the big picture before you get started, go to the website, scriptorpublishinggroup.com. It'll be in the show notes probably. Go to that and just do the free download of the 7 steps to writing and publishing your book. That's it. That's the overarching umbrella. Literally what we bring everybody through, the 7 steps from that brain dump at the beginning to marketing your book because it's now in your hand. Those are the 7 steps, and they're all in that little PDF that you can download for free.
Awesome. Thank you. Because one thing that I do want to do is I want to highlight, while I have you here, one book in particular. Like you said, you guys have published hundreds of books. This was a book I absolutely want to highlight, and I want you to share the story of how it came to be, as well as the person who reached out to you to write I don't want to say follow up, but just to write their version, right? Who was inspired by it, yeah. It's QuaranTEEN, Our New Normal. And it's 9 teenagers from throughout the country who share their experience of what it looked like going through the first stage of the pandemic. So we're going all the way back to March 2020, if people can remember that. And I found it so moving. And I have to say, surprisingly so, because I was like, oh, this is great. They're short and sweet, and I'm going to read through it. The poignancy of these young writers literally blew my mind. I was touched. I was brought to tears. I laughed out loud. The wisdom, that's the other, like, just they're so wise, and being able to visualize the stories that they were sharing and the way that they shared them, and the honesty that at their age is really, it's incredibly self-conscious to share your story, as we talked about with the fears at the beginning. As a teenager, you're in the depths of that. You're just like a raw nerve. So for them to be so honest in their experience, I feel is so huge. One thing that I love about writing in general and reading, especially nonfiction and fiction too, for sure, is, for me, it's feeling less alone. For me, it's that sense of connectivity. I just started reading nonfiction essays of women in their 40-ish years. That's what it's called, 40-ish. And I have laughed, I have cried, I felt so connected. I feel like it's not just me. Like when we talk about who am I to do this, it's like, well, actually you're in the vast majority. It's like, it's not just me. So you have that opportunity by writing your story, for even though it's your unique story, to inspire other people. Just like you said, that your friend Colleen, I believe, was inspired by Bernie. It's just so huge. And also really important, the reason I'm pulling this one out more than anything is just the mental health component of it that we didn't really talk about. And again, that's a whole other podcast to really dive into. The cathartic experience of being able to write a book, and especially for teens, because the teens were kind of sidelined during COVID, they were not the highlight. So for you guys to highlight this, just thank you so much. I feel like it literally could save lives if it hasn't already. And we know suicide rates have gone up, and we know mental health is dramatically on the rise, specifically with this age group. So can you just share the story of how this came to be?
Tell you, when we were prepping and you sent me a thing saying, I want to make sure we mention this book, my heart filled up, because this, I have worked with some amazing people, and there's some beautiful, beautiful books, but this one in particular is sort of near and dear to my heart. One of my very favorite things I've done since starting Scriptor. And I'll tell you the story of how it came about. It was March 2020, and all of my kids were home, and my kids are late teens, early 20s. So all these teens and just beyond were in my house. I have 5 kids, and my niece was with us as well. So I had 6 kids in the house, and I kept thinking, we've got to find something positive right now, because these kids are really struggling in a way that we were all struggling, but in a different way, because their connection and their social life, which is so important to them at those ages, was gone. And the fear and the uncertainty blows up in their mind in a different way. They don't have control, like all the things that that particular age group was experiencing. So I called Greg and I said, what do you think about offering for teenagers to write a book, give them something. They're going to be home. They need a project. It's positive. It's forward moving. It's something to sink their teeth into. Greg, all on board, of course. And so we put out a thing to our network and just said, hey, we're looking for some teenagers. And 9 teenagers showed up. And they were from all over the country. The youngest at that time was Brooke. She was 13 at that time. She's out of Aspen, Colorado. We had San Diego, we had Chicago, we had Boston, Springfield, we had New Orleans, Virginia, and then the 2 twins that are here local that did this book. And you know what we did? This is something different than we had ever done before. We actually took them through a writing course. So for 2 months, these teenagers got on a call with me on Zoom, which at that time, everybody was still trying to learn, right? So they were on this on a Sunday night for 8 weeks, and they wrote their chapters. And I took them through Anne Lamott's books, and I took them through William Glasser's books, and all these different books to teach them to write and to show them how to write well. And they showed up and they did it. And it was the most fun to watch them when they would get it and they would know what they wrote was good. And when they got zeroed in on what they were trying to say and they nailed it. But also that they actually got to know each other, and they got to meet and be part of this project with people they had never met before, still stay connected with. And they are all now, this book actually published, we published it and launched it in August of 2020. It was, to this day, the longest running bestseller that we've had. All of our books have hit #1 on Amazon, but this one was on there for the longest and in the most categories, for all the reasons, Christy, that you described, because it's told from the voice of these children, these teenagers, and they just speak it in a different way than we do.
I love that so much. I love the fact, this is something I didn't even really know, that they had gone through this process with you, which I think is so awesome. I love how you were able to, and I want to say that you even said it in the beginning here. I love it. So I'm going to paraphrase so I don't read it completely back to you. Before I do that, I just want to say I love the fact that you collected and connected these teens from all over the country, so they were given a social in a new way. So they have that novelty and that excitement about it, maybe a little trepidation, which is normal too. When you, like you said, it was ripped away without any notice. And I do wonder if maybe there any inhibitions that they may have had, if it was with people within their school, was lessened because they didn't know each other. Did you notice that at all?
They spoke about it. We did a podcast. They were on actually a couple different podcasts, and they spoke to that they were able to show up and be authentic and vulnerable in a way that they couldn't really be in their own schools and with their own friends, because they already have a thing, so you're spot on.
I think it's so cool. So they're able to show their genuine voice at that age, to share their perspective of where they're at, and do it in a way where they feel totally supported and seen in a new, fresh way. I love all that. So what you wrote at the beginning, which I felt like just hit so much, and this is what I felt like also transcended the age group that so many of us could understand. I also, because we have a tendency prior to COVID to dismiss teens. We do. When we think of teenagers, it's usually an eye roll, or it's usually like, oh boy, wait until they turn into a teen. It's just, it gives them no win. Like, we look at it like it's about us, but it gives them why would they look forward to become a teen if they're already hearing in some way within the ether that it's not great to be a teen, because pretty much everybody thinks you're just, ugh. So I just love that this shines a light on them, reminding us all that we were all teens. If we're lucky to be 20 plus, we all were teens at some point. So I love that it shines a light on them in a way that most people do not view teens. So I wanted to add that in. But your reasoning for getting them all together is that during this time, to be able to focus on something positive, interact with each other, create something that they could use for college applications and resumes. That was something, and even more so that they could contribute something meaningful to this uncertain time in their life. So it gave them that consistency that is such a safety when things are uncertain. And you are such an incredible navigator to help in those situations. So just bravo to all you guys, to every single one of you. I mean, it's just so amazing. And I want you to also share, we're also going to put where that people can buy this book too. It's Amazon, you said, but if you can buy it locally, even, do yourselves a favor and your community a favor. What was the second piece? So what was the second piece of the story after this book came out?
It's so good. And it's another reason why if you're listening right now and you're feeling nudged that you want to get something out into the world, I encourage you to do it, because you never, ever know where it will go and who it will inspire. We talked a little bit about it with Bernie and connecting me with my friend Colleen from elementary school. This book literally went to the other side of the world. There was a person listening to one of those podcasts while he was doing a treadmill workout in Australia. And he heard, it wasn't actually my podcast, it was Todd's. My mentor did a podcast with them, and he was listening to Todd's podcast about this book, and he heard these kids on that podcast, and he said, my kids who are younger, they're elementary, his son was in second grade at that point, need something like this. So he went to his school, son's school, and said, would you be interested in having the kids write a book about quarantine in Australia? The school got on board, the principal, the reading literacy teacher, they got on a call with me and with Greg, and we figured out a plan of how we were going to get this book written by this group of second graders down in New South Wales, Australia. And it's called QuaranTEEN Down Under, Through the Eyes of a Child. And the book is a series of pictures and little stories about what these second graders went through during quarantine in Australia. And at the beginning of the book, the 5th and 6th graders from that school wrote the foreword.
Oh,
and so beautiful. Each of them wrote their own little bit about why this book was important and why this time in their life was so important. So we ended up publishing this book for this beautiful school down in Australia, all because they had heard the book, the students that wrote this book, the kids, and were inspired.
It's such an incredible story. And it goes back to that idea of you, Colleen, and Bernie, and then Todd, because his son is one of the young writers too. I read his story, which was so beautiful. I'm telling you, you guys have to buy this book. It is, you just got to buy it. It's these snapshots throughout our country. And I mean, it'll bring you to tears. It's so moving and it's so relatable. Even, I'm in my 40s and I'm relating to 13-year-olds in the sense that sense of what am I going to do with myself? I'm feeling empty. I'm feeling vacant. What am I going to do? And how there was an uplift and how they did start seeing things differently. There's even a reference to what's going to be a classic COVID birthday with the cars all in a row driving and how it turned out to be a great birthday. And there's just so much to it. And I want to also just end today with, we talked so much about fears. It's not, and I want you to add to this, it's not about losing all of your fears. It's about quieting them down and being able to move through them, because sometimes when you are feeling that fear mixed with excitement, that actually is an indicator that you're going the right way. So can you just add any inspiration to when that fear does pop up, what that can look like moving through it and following it?
Yeah, for sure. And this is, you and I talk about this topic so many times because it's so true. Fear finds its way into our life all the time because it is our most instinctual response for preservation and protection. So back when we were cave people running from saber-toothed tigers or whatever, we had to have fear because the emotion of fear inspired the adrenaline. It made us move faster, allowed us to react and have fight or flight. So it allowed us to survive. So it is a really important emotion. But it is not the controlling emotion unless we choose to let it be a controlling emotion. So you and I speak often about Elizabeth Gilbert, who really writes this beautifully in her book, Big Magic. She actually writes a letter to fear, and her letter to fear is this: Fear, thank you so much for showing up, for giving me a moment to pause. And I always sort of, in my mind, add this little piece. Like if you're walking up to the cliff, fear is there to make you stop before you jump. So you can consider, is the jump the right thing? Or am I prepared with the tools I need to make the jump? Like, it's just a pause, right? So she says, thank you for showing up and giving me a chance to pause and consider. However, I'm the one driving the car. This is my car. You can get in the back seat. You can ride along. That's fine. But you cannot speak. You're in the back seat. I'm the one who's driving the car. And I think that is just a beautiful visual of where to put fear. Yes, fear is there. The object for me is never to say, I don't ever want to be afraid. It's impossible. The more you resist fear, the more fear you get. So totally. For me, it's allowing fear to do what it was meant to do, protect us. Excellent. It's making me slow down and consider. It's giving me a chance to pause. But ultimately, I'm the one driving the car and I get to decide. Am I inspired enough to do it? Do I have enough tools to get me started? Do I have enough excitement and energy that's going to pull me forward? Then I'm driving the car and fear can get in the back seat and not speak. And that's what I think. I think if you are out there and your fear is driving the car, then you're going to be at that red light for your life. If you're ready to do it, if you're inspired enough, then put fear where it belongs, in the back seat. It's watching you. That's fine. Thank you so much. But let's get on with life.
Yes. And I love that. Let's get on with life. Just period.
Period.
Obsessed. Just like, let's get on with life. And it's not
things to do than argue with fear.
Totally. And there's two things to close that piece. So one is you're not throwing fear out the window. So it's not like I love that, because I also am not a fan of the fearless. I don't think we're supposed to be fearless. It's that whole fear the fear and move through it anyway, the best you can. And then when you get the tools, when you are able to slow it down, the fear starts dissipating and you're able to hear the tools you need. And the tools may be, oh, you know what? I actually need, I need to reach out to somebody. So I'm going to call Scriptor or whoever. I'm going to call a friend of mine who I know has written a book. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it all alone, coming full circle back to what you were talking about, which I love that. And I also feel like it's something where fear is going to be there. And you said it so well, doing your adaptation of Elizabeth Gilbert's work is like such a visual of fear seeming like it's so ha ha ha, almost like the Wizard of Oz, where at the end you find out like who it is, right? And you're like, what? So when you actually turn to go, whoa, I just visualize fear shrinking into like a kid being like, I'm sorry, like you think it's a huge shadow, and then all of a sudden you turn, you realize it's like a little child. And for me, that helps talk to fear. When I talk to fear, like, you know, the way that I would talk to my kids, really, when they're not driving me bananas and I'm kinder in my words, you know, that has a tendency to work for me. So I want to throw that in for anybody who just needs different ways to how do I handle the fear when it pops up? Just pausing to look at it and to do what you just said, like, let's get on with it. It's like kids, they need that structure, they need that stability. So when they know, like fear, that you're in charge, fear will go in the back seat, probably willingly, to be honest.
That's exactly right.
You know,
that's exactly right. Because honestly, it's too afraid to be the driver anyway, right?
Yeah, reckless, absolutely
It doesn't really
reckless.
want to be the driver. It's only there to be the warning sign. So let it be the warning sign. Great. It's giving you a chance to think a little deeper, to be cautious in a good way, and then make a decision based on what you know and where you're going versus what's holding you back.
So fantastic. Kelli, thank you so much. This was always such an enlightening and wonderful conversation. I have to keep checking the time because we are right on time, but I know we can go on forever because we just gel so well off of each other. So thank you so much. And if or when people want to hear more about how they can start writing their book or even dip their toe in to learn more, where can they go to find out more?
ScriptorPublishingGroup.com is the easiest place. Go to the website. You can sign up for an initial consultation there if that's what you want to do. You can download that PDF. It's free if you want to do that. You can listen to our podcasts on there. You can find the books that we've published. So everything's on there. And of course, on social media, Scriptor Publishing Group on any of the major social media platforms.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for offering just for someone to shoot you an email like, hey, can we just jump on a call to untangle what's happening? Because telling you from experience, everybody, Kelli is your lady. So please take her up on that. We need better stories. We need truer stories, and we need them because they inspire us to be better people, and we need a safer, better world. So thank you so much for being at the forefront of this, I'll call it, it's a mission. And you're totally at the forefront of it. Greg is too. And we're just so grateful for you.
Thank you, Christy. Great talking with you.
You too.